Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to find out who the people that Moses saved in the book of Exodus really are, because we're confused. We're very confused when it comes to who the so-called chosen people really are. We also have a lot of people who swear and truly believe that the Bible is only so-called Black history, when that's just not true at all. And the further we go into analyzing what I'm talking about, which we're going to do in this video, the more we'll see that no, it's not just Black history. It's not. Part of the Bible is what today many would call so-called Black history, but not all of the Bible is so-called Black history. And the more you think about it, as a result of the more research that you do, some very surprising facts will start to appear that will make you question what you thought when it comes to who really are the people that are known as the 12 tribes of Israel. As we dig deeper with our study of the Bible, and as we further explore the many other books that are related to the Bible, more of the hidden mysteries that have to do with the 12 tribes of Israel will start to reveal themselves. So we're going to get into some of these mysteries that pertain to the 12 tribes of Israel and start to unravel who they really are. And by the end of the video, you will have been exposed to an entirely different perspective when it comes to the 12 tribes of Israel that isn't taught at all and is completely overlooked by some of the most Bible quoting people. And that's because the masses aren't given the truth. So let's dig into these mysteries about God's chosen people. And the God I refer to is called Yahweh in the Hebrew Bible. But before we get into it, make sure you hit the like button if you find the content that we're putting out on this channel useful. And if you watch the channel but haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do so and hit the bell notification so that way you know when we drop a new videos. Also, if you haven't already done so, make sure to visit the website. It's called lostalongtheway.org, and you'll find topics of discussion on the website that you won't find anywhere else. And if you haven't already gotten it, get the video book. Make sure to get the video book, because all of what I'm talking about in these different videos that are on the channel, see, they relate to the video book in one way or another, because it all has to do with who we really are as a people. And this knowledge has been purposely hidden from us. So make sure to go to the website, check out some of the blog articles, and get the video book. I can promise you that once you get done with that video book, your life is going to be changed forever. This is not maybe. And let me know in the comments how you feel about the discussion that we're about to have today. If you agree, let me know. If you disagree, let me know why. And don't just cuss me out and say that's BS and no, he's wrong. See, I don't care if you do that. I mean, I'm not filtering none of the comments. You write whatever you want. It's going through. The only way it's not going through is because YouTube censored you. I'm not censoring no comments. Okay. But what I'm saying is just back up whatever you're going to say with something, because sometimes people be in the comments saying, oh, that's just some bull crap. That's lies. He don't know what he's talking about. I believe in Jesus. I mean, okay. I don't have any problem with that, but just back up what you're saying with something. That's all I'm saying. I'm completely not against you disagreeing with anything I got to say. Like I said, I let every comment go through, whether I like it or not, whether you're talking crazy to me or not, it don't make me no difference. The comment's going to go through. Back up what you're saying, because like I said, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I'm right. So let's get started. In order to start uncovering the mysteries that I refer to when it comes to the 12 tribes of Israel. First, we have to start seeing who Yahweh really is, who Yahweh shows his favor towards, and who Yahweh constantly protects and saves. We have to look at the prophecies, like the slave prophecies, and who was being brought over on ships. We have to look at who were the people who were being dispersed when it comes to what a lot of people call the diaspora. We have to look at power structures, the power structures of this world and how they've changed throughout time. And then we'll look at who benefited from all of these changes as a result of Yahweh's intervention into various historical events. And I say the name Yahweh because a lot of you will come at me like, that's not his name. And I hear you. I hear you. The only reason I say Yahweh is because when we take the Bible, which is not an English book, it's a Hebrew book. And we translate the word God in Hebrew from Hebrew. See, the word God translates as many different things in Hebrew. When they're writing down those various words, when they're referring to God, it translates into all kinds of different things. Sometimes it translates as God, but sometimes it translates as El Shaddai. Sometimes it translates into Baal. Lord, the Lord translates into Baal at various places throughout the Bible. The gods, plural, it translates to the gods. It doesn't just translate to God. In the English Bible, it only says God, right? And so there's a reason for that, and it's called monotheism, right? But when we know that there must be an agenda when it comes to monotheism, and even God himself says there's other gods, when we realize this is a Hebrew book, it's a Hebrew book. So if you're going to read the Bible and you have people translating it in a way that it shouldn't be translated, then I just don't trust that translator. And the way that God is translated throughout the Bible, when it's referring to this specific God, the specific God of Moses is translates as Yahweh. And so that's why I use that word. Okay. We're also going to have a look outside of the Bible, because when we do, we see that there are stories that are in other historical texts that are thousands of years older than the Bible, but they relate to the Bible. And some of the stories that are thousands of years older are the same stories as the Bible. So we know where the Bible got that story from. Okay. So that lets me know that whoever it is who wrote the Bible, they got their stories from some of these other sources. So these sources must be important, or they wouldn't be copying it into the Bible. Some of these texts are texts that used to be in the Bible, and they are still in some Bibles, but were later taken out. And although they were taken out, they're still discussed in the Bible. We'll look at the book of Enoch, because this book has some relevant texts that have to do with the discussion. And we'll also look at some of the ancient Sumerian texts, because many of the stories of the Bible can be found in the ancient Sumerian texts, like the creation story, the story of the Tower of Babel, the story of the flood. And these are just to name a few. Some of us know, but many of us don't know that when we look into the ancient Sumerian texts, it starts to become very clear that Yahweh and Enki are the same God. When we know this, we can look at the creation story in the Sumerian text, which is, like I said, thousands of years older than the Bible, and then look at the Bible, which has that same story in it, and see how both Yahweh and Enki are both the creators of mankind. When we know this, we can also start to see that it is Yahweh who is also Enki, who loves his creation. It's not Enlil who wanted to destroy the creation. And he didn't just want to destroy it. He's attributed to causing the flood to destroy it. Okay. And for this reason, there is this war of the gods. That's part of that war of the gods that's going on. Enki and his helpers, who are described as angels or the watchers in the book of Enoch, were working with him to help create what they call modern humans. And they ended up falling in love with their creation. So much so that according to the book of Enoch, they came down and started sleeping with, having babies with, and making families with their creation. And the more we study, the easier it is to see that Yahweh is the leader of the fallen angels who fell in love with their creation. And what crime could he have possibly committed? Well, this story is told in the book of Enoch in a very detailed manner, which was also taken out of the Bible in every land that the Catholic Church ended up taking over. But you can still find it in the Ethiopian Bible because the Catholic Church never took over Ethiopia. And there's a secret reason for that, but that's a whole nother video within itself. This is where we can find the detailed story of the fallen angels, these angels who fell in love with their creation. But we've been tricked into believing that the fallen angels are these angels with wings or these spiritual-like beings with no form that came down and had with the creation, which is Adam and Eve's children and descendants, and they made these babies that they refer to as the Nephilim, who are their children. And these Nephilim are really these 11,000 foot tall giants, when this isn't the case at all. See, because the word Nephilim does not mean giant, even though they purposely mistranslate it into meaning that word giant to throw you completely off. And we know that because the root word of Nephilim, which is a plural word, is Nepal in Hebrew. This word doesn't translate into anything that has to do with giant when we translate it for ourselves. It only translates like that when we rely on the church to translate it for us. The word Nepal, Nephilim being the plural version of that word, it translates into one that made another one fall. That's what it means. And that translation makes perfect sense when we know the story of the fallen angels. They even tell this story in the movie Superman. Superman is this godlike man who's got all these superpowers, and he's from another planet, and he wears the upside down pyramid with this upside down snake inside of it. His outfit is red and blue, for those of you who know the symbolisms of the red and blue. And he falls in love with this immortal woman, Lois Lane. He's told that the only way he can be with her is to give up all of his powers. And he does that. Now, he ends up getting his powers back later in the story. And then Lois ends up dying. But he ends up breaking the rule of interfering with life on the planet and brings her back to life. But even this movie is telling the story of the fallen angels and how they had to give up their powers to be with the women that they loved. Calling the Nephilim giants by using translation is just a distraction to throw you off as to who everyone truthfully is. Yahweh, who is Superman in this movie, who's also known as Enki in the Sumerian text, was given orders by the king of the gods, who is his brother Enlil, to create a new being in response to the Igigi's request to find another way to get the gods' work done. And the Igigi are the gods, but they're the younger gods. They're not the leaders of the gods, who in the Bible are referred to as angels. These angels, or younger gods, or seraphim, or cherubim, were doing the work of the leaders of the gods. But this work had become overbearing for them. So they decided they were no longer going to do the work. And as a result, their leaders, who are called the Anunnaki, Enlil, Enki's brother being their leader, decided to make a new creation in the likeness of the Ajiji and the Anunnaki so that they could do the work for them. And after 6 generations, the seed of the Neanderthal, which is referred to as the hominin by the ancient astronaut theorists, was implanted into Isis, one of the goddesses, who is a so-called black woman. This is who brought Adam to term. They would later start grafting the descendants so that they could remove the black out and the animalistic traits out, so that they would become what today we know of as modern humans. This is the story of Genesis, or the genes of Isis, because Isis is the so-called black woman goddess who took the embryo of the Neanderthal and took it to term in her own womb. They later made Eve from him, and they made this new group of modern humans that were created to be the opposite of the gods in every single way, including the fact that the woman came from the man. But this is not so with the original gods. The woman only came from man when it comes to the creation that was made, this new creation that was made to do the work. But the gods who created Adam and Eve, see, they all come from a woman, every last one of them. So this is the first way that they were made to be opposite to the gods, and they made them to be the opposite to the gods, the Ajiji, in every single way. And when I say Ajiji, all of the gods are Ajiji. The Anunnaki are the leaders of those gods. So, for example, they made the creation to be an analytical type of people instead of a creative type of people. And they did this because their job was to do the work and be able to do a good job at their work. They made them to want to do work. Unlike the Ajiji, who quit the work of the gods. This is a hard working creation. It's their instinct and their nature to want to work hard, because their entire purpose of existing in the first place was to do the work. They were also made to follow their creator, who is God to them, and also go to war for that God on his behalf. The Ajiji were the complete opposite of this new creation. They aren't analytical workers. They're the creators and the bosses of the workers. They're the ones who give direction and create the vision and move the work forward. They don't do the work themselves. No different from a CEO is not out there doing the work in the factory. He's got workers who do that, but he's the one who guides the work. He's the leader of the company. The Ajiji are the executives. They're not the workers. They couldn't and didn't want to endure that hard work, which was against their own nature. But they were made to oversee the work that needed to be done. They were made to give direction to the people who they created as their workers so that they could get the work done. And that's the reason why they made the creation to do that work for them. They're the creatives. They may not have wanted to do the work, and maybe they were lazy according to the historians and the ancient astronaut theorists who talk about them. But they weren't too lazy to create a new, entirely different group of people who have the instinct to work, to do that work for them. They weren't too lazy to do that. But again, they made the modern humans to be the opposite of the Ajiji by genetical engineering. And they did this because they didn't need the creation quitting their jobs like the Ajiji did. So they purposely made them to be the exact opposite of the Ajiji in every way. They also made them to be the opposite when it came to being immortal, as the Anunnaki and Ajiji are all immortals. These are what they call advanced humans that were created to do the work that the Ajiji stopped doing. And this is where the story of Adam and Eve really comes from. This is when so-called white people were created. This is why so-called white people have Neanderthal blood in them. Every one of them has Neanderthal blood in them. The only so-called black people who have traces of Neanderthal blood are the ones who have mixed with them. They were created in our image from the hominid, who is the Neanderthal or the caveman or the wild man, because the gods who are men could no longer do the gods' work. Their creations are the humans. Hue, when we break down that word, human. The word hue means color. So they're a man of a different color, also known as mankind, or kind of like the original man, but not the original man, because the man who already existed was already here. And so-called black people created the humans for a specific reason in the exact way that the humans are trying to create AI right now, and for the exact same reason, so that the AI can do the work that they don't want to do. And one of the craziest parts is, just like the robots who took over the humans in the movie Terminator, our creation took us over in the same way with the help of their creator and God, Enki, or Yahweh, who is the power behind them. And now the creation is trying to create a new creation of their own. And what's even crazier is that they're scared that this new creation that they're making, AI, might take them over in the same way that they took us over, with the help of their God, Yahweh, which is symbolized as Superman in the movie. So many of these movies tell the story. This is where they get the ideas for these types of movies from. The ones who tell the history and the stories the best win the Oscars. This is why the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. After the 6th generation of perfecting the new creation, they started to become beautiful, as many so-called white women are very beautiful to this day. As a result, the angels, who are men, they're not spirits that don't have a form. No spirits with no form were coming down having with women and making babies. No angelic beings that have these wings were flying down and having with women. No green aliens were coming down and these monster looking creatures having with women. Very attractive looking men were coming down and having sex with women. And these men are the angels. These angels who are men who created the humans in their image started to fall in love with their creation. They started to have with and make families with them. The children of these humans that were mixed with angels were known as the Nephilim. They're doing the exact same thing with AI. They're making these robots that they got people having with these robots. And then you've also got people who are making themselves into cyborgs, who are attaching artificial limbs to their bodies to become half robot, half human. So they started having with these humans, their creations, and making families with them. The children of these humans that mixed with the angels are known as the Nephilim. It was men who were doing this, not these gray aliens, not no green lizard people. It's men who were doing this. And these men who created humans and had babies with the humans fathered the children of the great experiment who were saved from the flood by Enki, who is their creator, who is their God. But Enki, who is also Yahweh and even Superman in the movie, is not the God of the angels. Enlil is the king of the gods, who are the Ajiji, their leaders being the Anunnaki. And Asherah is who helped create the creation. Asherah or Isis. Enki is only the god of the humans that he created. So it can be said that Yahweh is God, but he's not God to the gods. He's God to the people, the advanced humans that he created. His son is Thoth, who's also Jesus or Hermes. These are some of the fallen angels and their children, but they're not the only angels. The Bible says that 1/3 of the angels fell, not all of them. And the reason for their fall was for making families and having babies with their creation. Like I said, the word Nephilim actually means one who made another one fall. So Enki had a team of gods who are men, who are the Ajiji, the original men, or gods, or angels, who help create these modern humans through selective breeding and genetic manipulation. This is one of the reasons it's so vilified and restricted by religion, because when doing selective breeding, anyone can't just have with whoever they feel like having. Otherwise, it'll mess up the experiment. And the way that they're able to explain this to the humans was with religion. But the gods and the angels, who are so-called black people, became divided over this new creation in the same way that people are being divided about the new creation that the creation is making now, which is AI. Because we got a lot of people out there who don't want nothing to do with AI, and they don't want nothing to do with technology. And they think that this technology is pushing us and taking us into the wrong direction. Well, the same thing and the same arguments at a different time with a different creation was happening back then. And it divided the people in the same way people are divided today over AI. And eventually, the leader of the gods, who are the Anunnaki, tried to destroy the creation through the great flood by order of the king of the gods, which is Enlil. But unbeknownst to the gods, Enki had Noah build an ark. And these advanced humans that were created, who are the Nephilim, they were saved. So the humans and the Nephilim were both saved during the flood. Most Hebrew Israelites will say that Noah was a so-called black man. But what does the book of Enoch have to say when it comes to Noah? And how does the book of Enoch describe Noah? He's described in chapter 105 as whiter than snow and redder than the bloom of a rose. The hair on his head is whiter than white wool, and his eyes are like rays of the sun. And he opened his eyes, and thereupon lighted up the whole house. So according to the book of Enoch, Noah was very different. So much so that Lamech didn't believe that he was his child. And if we take notice, when it comes to Lamech, there just so happens to be two different Lamechs. One who's the son of Methuselah, supposedly from the line of Seth, and another who's supposedly from the line of Cain. And they just so happen to have fathers with almost identical names as well. The one from the line of Seth is named Methuselah, and the one from the line of Cain is named Methushael. But there's a reason that the supposed descendants of Seth and the descendants of Cain all have the same names, with some key slight differences, and they're put in a slightly different order, some of them. And this is to keep up the story that the descendants of Cain and the Nephilim are all dead. They all got wiped out by the flood, when this isn't the case at all. See? And when we look up these names like Methuselah versus Methushael, notice at the end of Methushael, there's that word El, which means God. Why? Because this is just a big clue that this is one of the descendants of one of the angels. Because that word El is another word for God. And it's one of the angels, or a child of the angel, who was sleeping with the modern humans. See, I did this video about the book of Enoch and the descendants of Cain, and everybody thought I was just so crazy when I said Enoch is the son of Cain, who wrote Cain's son is Enoch. And this is the Enoch who has a book of the Bible that was taken out. And why was it taken out? Because it's telling the story about the sons of Cain, Enoch. And what does the book of Enoch talk about? This genetic experiment that I'm talking about. In order to keep his creation under control, he had to make himself their God and call his workers his angels. This is the fallout between the serpent in the Bible, the tree of life, which is Asherah. Asherah is the serpent or the devil who doesn't agree with keeping the creation dumb and encourages them to eat from the tree of knowledge. Yahweh finds out and gets mad and kicks them out of the garden. And his punishment to them is to make them go to work. But I was coming from a place where I see that these two lines of Seth and Cain are really one and the same. But let's look at what Wikipedia has to say about it. They say that scholars have noted similarities between these descents. Most of the names in each are variants of those in other, though their order differs, with the names of Enoch and Mahalalel/Mehujael switching places in the two pedigrees. It is as if they were different versions of the same underlying tradition. This has led speculation that a single original genealogical descent had diverged during independent transmission, only to be brought back together and put to different uses when the book of Genesis was compiled from its Jahwist and priestly sources. Okay, so when they brought it back together, and the Jahwist and priestly sources compiled the book of Genesis, and why would they want to create two different lines when there was originally only one? And then further take the book of Enoch out entirely, because they're trying to hide this story. And they're trying to make everyone believe that the Nephilim are all these giants when the word doesn't even translate to giant. But they know we won't look it up for ourselves. So they purposely mistranslate it, and then they say that everybody just died in the flood, when the truth is that Adam and Eve are the creation, which are so-called white people, and the Nephilim are a mix between the gods and the so-called white people, who are the advanced humans who came from the Neanderthal. These are the descendants of Adam, the creation. And how did the Nephilim survive the flood if the only beings that survived the flood were Noah and the people he brought with him? Well, that's really easy to break down, because all we have to do is look at the book of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 33, where it talks about when the Israelites, who Moses had saved, ran into the Nephilim. And when they ran into them, they were terrified. It says, "We even saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, that come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our sight, and we must have seemed the same to them." So that verse right there, which is after the flood, it proves that Noah and his family weren't the only survivors of the flood. Enoch was a Canaanite, and the Canaanites are who would become the ancient Egyptians. See, they're a lighter brown mixture of the gods and the descendants of Cain. But by the time of Moses, they had built their own cities, and something must have happened for them to fall out with Yahweh, because he sent Moses in to take over their cities. He must not have liked the way they were treating his creation, and didn't like that they were worshiping the God of the angels, their fathers, who is Asherah. The Egyptians had enslaved them. He freed the Israelites from the Egyptians and gave them the city that belonged to the Nephilim. Noah didn't look like the other people who were around, not because everyone who was around was a so-called black person, but because he's described as an albino in every single way. He was described as similar to the children of the angels. Not exactly like them, but similar, because he had all of their features. But he was an albino. That's why he was whiter than snow and redder than a rose. And he had eyes like the feet of the sun. So he didn't look like any of the other descendants of Cain who were all white. He had that white hair that was whiter than wool. And he was acting like the other people who were around, because when he opened his mouth, he started to converse with the Lord of Justice. So where was the Lord of Justice when he was born if he started conversing with the Lord of Justice? He was in the room conversing with his real father, because the Lord of Justice is his real father. Enki, or Yahweh, is the Lord of Justice, who is Noah's father. And that's why he saved him during the great flood. His supposed father, Lamech, immediately knew that this was not his child and was scared of him because he looked similar to the children of the angels in heaven. This is according to the book of Enoch. Enoch responded to Methuselah, Lamech's father, after telling him what happened in the line of Jared, which was his father, that the angels started having with and making babies and families with the angels. So since this baby, who looked like the other children of the angels, when he came out, Lamech knew this wasn't his baby. and that it had to be one of the angels' babies, who Enoch told Methuselah had been sleeping with modern women. So they're saying in this story that Noah is a child of the angels, and that he was conversing with Yahweh upon birth. And he was conversing with Yahweh, who is the Lord of justice, because the Lord of justice is his real father. After the flood, the numbers of both the descendants of Cain and the descendants of the angels, those numbers replenished. But as they were later found, the people who are the descendants of Cain were enslaved by the Egyptians. The descendants of the creation became the slaves of Egypt. And these are the chosen people who were saved by Moses. And how was Yahweh able to save them? With the Ark of the Covenant and his spaceship that they referred to as his glory, that Moses demanded that he bring with him as proof to show the Nephilim, who they were going to go up against, that they are God's chosen people. This is why he saved Noah from the flood, because Noah was his son. He's just an albino version. This is the bloodline of Jacob or Yaqub, these Egyptian slaves that Moses saved are not just black people. They are mostly so-called white people who are the Goths. They are a combination of the gods who are the men who created them and the creation themselves. The line of Esau, who are also gods and angels, are the Canaanites, who are the Egyptians, who were holding them as slaves in Egypt. This is where the division between so-called black people originated, over this punishment for having with the creation. One brother, the king of the gods, Enlil, characterized as Esau, is the oldest and the one in charge. He wanted to kill the creation and tried to, while Enki, who is characterized as Yaqub or Jacob, did not. But they're all family members. So when we know this history, we can start to see the Bible for what it really is. And we can know who is being delivered from Egypt and who God's chosen people really are and why. Jacob and Esau are twin brothers. And the only difference between the two is one had magnificent red hair. He didn't have hair all over his body, which if you translate it for yourself from Hebrew, it says he had magnificent red hair. He didn't have hair all over his body and look like some red animal. Okay. But you got to translate it for yourself to know that. They're twin brothers. And the line of Canaan, who are the ancient Egyptians, comes from Esau, and the line of Israel comes from Jacob. There's so much confusion about who Esau or Enlil really is. But this all stems from Yahweh's hate for his brother, or Jacob's hate for his brother in the Bible. And we have to remember that the Bible is Enki's book. It's Yahweh's book. So he's not going to have anything good to say about his twin brother that he hates for trying to kill his creation, which includes his own son. He made his son into Jesus. So we know that he loves his son. But the descendants of Esau, who are the Canaanites, who would later become the ancient Egyptians, even though that's not their real name, and who would later become the original Romans. These are all so-called black people. This is who the descendants of Jacob, who are the descendants of the gods or angels, who created and slept with their creation and their creations in bondage in Egypt. This is who held the descendants of Jacob, who are the descendants of the gods or angels who created and slept with their creation and their creations in bondage in Egypt. Their leader Enki or Yaqub or Jacob came and saved the descendants of Jacob along with the descendants of Japheth, who are the creation from what we know of as the Egyptians in the story of Moses. Both the descendants of Jacob and Esau are the descendants of both Enki and Enlil. Enlil is symbolized as the red, and Enki is symbolized as the blue for various reasons. The Goths are symbolized as the white, who are on the side of Enki. Enlil and Enki are both the original people, but Enki was left entrapped here on this earth for saving his creation that his brother, the king of the gods, tried to destroy. The gods left after the flood and promised to return, leaving Enki here with his creation. The earth became his temporary prison until what is known as Judgment Day comes. As the earth started to recover, Enki continued breeding and bettering his creation, but they ended up falling into the hands of the descendants of Enlil. So Yahweh came to Moses and saved them, although he was left here on earth and can't leave very far from here. He still had some ancient technology. He also stole the Ark of the Covenant, so he had plenty of power. And this is what the Israelites used to take over the lands that they moved into. Yahweh or Enki came to Moses in his spaceship and he freed them. But then after freeing them, he had to get them together and start civilizing them as a people, because we have to remember that they came from the Neanderthal. So this is where we really have to start thinking about who the chosen people really are, because some of them are the descendants of Jacob, the Nephilim, but most of them are not. Let's just think about this. Who did he have to teach to wash their hands after they went boo-boo? He didn't have to teach the gods who helped create them how to wash their hands. And this isn't just me talking. First, let's just go to the book of Deuteronomy and see what it has to say. So we'll go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 23, verse 9 through 14. And it says, "When you are encamped against your enemies, then you shall keep yourself from every wicked thing. If any man among you becomes unclean because of a nocturnal emission, he must leave the camp and stay outside. When evening approaches, he must wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may return to camp. You must have a place outside the camp to go and relieve yourself. And you must have a digging tool in your equipment so that when you relieve yourself, you can dig a hole and cover up your excrement. For the Lord, your God, walks throughout your camp to protect you and deliver your enemies to you. Your camp must be holy, lest he see anything unclean among you and turn away from you." Okay? Now just reading these verses further proves that the God of Moses was a man who, when upon walking through the camp, saw some human excrement, some human boo-boo, and he was disgusted. And he said, "This is unholy." If he was some spirit with no form and he's just everywhere at the same time, well, what difference would it make? See, it wouldn't be so important. It wouldn't say, lest he see anything unclean among you and turn away from you. See, a spirit wouldn't see a piece of crap sitting on the ground and be disgusted and turn away. And the Israelites want to tell us that the so-called black people were these same Israelites who just boo-booed wherever they were at and just left it there in their camp. But see, this isn't the only time that God had to tell the Israelites to stop being the boo-boo people. So if we go down to Leviticus chapter 15, verse 1, it says, "And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, say unto the Israelites, when any man has a bodily discharge, the discharge is unclean. This uncleanness is from his discharge, whether his body allows the discharge to flow or blocks it. So his discharge will bring about uncleanness." Now let's pause and see what he's saying here. The Lord is telling Moses to tell the Israelites that when a man goes boo-boo, which is his discharge, that it is unclean. He even says whether the body allows the discharge to flow or blocks it. So he is describing whether you are stopped up or whether it's flowing. Either way, the boo-boo will bring about uncleanliness. Okay? He has to explain to these people that boo-boo is unclean. And if you have to explain to someone that boo-boo is unclean, then we aren't talking about a very hygienic people. But we're going to continue. Verse 4, "Any bed on which the man with the discharge lies will be unclean, and any furniture on which he sits will be unclean." So we're going to pause again. He had to tell them not only is your boo-boo unclean, but after you go boo-boo, not to lay in your bed afterwards or sit on your furniture afterwards. But we're going to continue. Verse 5, "Anyone who touches his bed," that the person who boo-booed and just sat down on their bed afterwards, they must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until the evening. "Whoever sits on furniture on which the man with the discharge was sitting must wash his clothes and bathe in water, and he will be unclean until evening." Okay? So if you boo-boo, don't go sitting on any furniture after that with your boo-boo butt. That's what this verse just said. You don't just boo-boo, not wash your hands or your butt, and then just go sitting on furniture or getting in your bed with your boo-boo butt. He even has to tell them not to sit on any furniture where boo-boo man sat at. So boo-boo man would have a seat, and he just went boo-boo. He have a seat, leave boo-boo on the seat, and then somebody else go sit down right after him. They had to tell them this is not okay. He made sure to be real clear as he continued by saying, "Whoever touches the body of a man with the discharge must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. If the man with the discharge spits on one who is clean," so they just told you that they run around spitting on each other, "that person must wash his clothes and bathe in water, and he will be unclean until evening. Any saddle on which the man with the discharge rides will be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him," he specifies under him, where the boo-boo's at, "will be unclean until evening. And whoever carries such things must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening." Now, God is going through all of this with the Israelites because God is so disgusted with these people, because he has to say to them that any saddle which boo-boo butt rides on will be unclean. And whoever touches anything that was under him will be unclean until the evening. After you go wash yourself and clean yourself and go sit out by yourself until the evening. He says you can't even carry boo-boo butts things without washing your hands and taking a bath. And even after that, you'll be unclean all day and don't even come back around until the evening after you done washed yourself. This what he's telling them. But we're going to continue. If the man with the discharge touches anyone without first washing his hands with water, the one who was touched must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Okay. Any clay pot that the man with the discharge touches must be broken, and any wooden utensil must be rinsed with water. So if Boo Boo Butt touches anyone without first washing his hands, even the one who was touched must wash his clothes and bathe, and even after that, he will be unclean all day until the evening. He is so disgusted with them that he says any pot that Boo Boo Butt touches must be broken. It must be broken. And any wooden utensils must be washed. Who are the people that he has to teach these things to? Because these are the Israelites that he's teaching them this to. The ones who were the slaves that got freed. This is who he's teaching them these things to. Are these the so-called black tribes of Jacob who don't know how to wipe their butt? Who are these people that he has to teach these things to? But let's continue with verse 13. When the man has been cleansed from his discharge, he must count off 7 days for his cleansing, wash his clothes, and bathe himself in fresh water, and shall be clean. On the 8th day, he is to take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, come before the Lord at the entrance to the tent meeting, and give them to the priest. The priest is to sacrifice them, one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for the man before the Lord because of his discharge. So we're going to pause again. After Boo Boo Butt has been cleansed, and he has to count off 7 days because they trying to teach these people a lesson. He had to wash his clothes and go bathe himself, and only after a week shall he be clean. Okay, and then on the 8th day, he must come and make an offering. See, because they want to make this big deal about it so that people will stop being Boo Boo Butt. They have to make an atonement for it. They have to make examples of it. They have to say, this is sin, this is unholy. Okay, but he continues. Verse 16. When a man has an emission of semen, he must bathe his whole body with water, and he will be unclean until evening. Any clothing or leather on which there is an emission of semen must be washed with water, and it will remain unclean until evening. If a man lies with a woman and there is an emission of semen, both must bathe in water, and they will remain unclean until evening. Okay? So these are the people who Moses saved, who were obviously a very nasty people. And there's a reason for that. Because they were the cavemen. These are the descendants of Japheth, who were in the process of still being civilized. They were just coming out of slavery from the Egyptians. They would just boo-boo on themselves and keep it moving. They just leave it there. They wouldn't they wouldn't wipe their butt. They would just boo-boo. They would just boo-boo and leave it there. And God had to teach them. God had to tell Moses, look, I can't take this. This was unholy. And if you want me to hang around y'all got to start wiping y'all butts. They would have, and then they wouldn't wash themselves afterwards. And they just leave everything hanging, all the fluids just hanging around on their clothes. And then run around touching everything. See, these are the people that the God of Israel saved according to the Bible. And why are these people living so nasty? And why are they living like animals? Because these are the descendants of Japheth, who were cavemen, who are the wild man, who are the Neanderthal, who are the creation. These are the creations of Enki, who were imprisoned by the Egyptians. And Enki and Moses freed them. They were the slaves. But they got you thinking you were the slaves. These are groups of gods who God had taken and made his special people. But these aren't all of the creation who would later call themselves gods. These are just one specific group of his creation. Later, the Moors would have to do the same exact thing with a different group of gods during what they call the Renaissance. This is when, and they did this so they would stop spreading what's called the Black Plague. This is when the Moors started teaching the Christians, who are the Goths, that y'all have to. We know your religion says that it's vanity to take a bath. We know it says that, but you have to take a bath. You have to clean up after yourself. You have to wipe your butt. You can't just take your feces and throw it out the window and let it sit there. Because that's what they would do. And this isn't me talking. This is just a fact. They wouldn't change their clothes because Christianity taught them to deny themselves everything, and changing clothes was vanity. They wouldn't take baths because this was vanity. They wouldn't wash their hands because this is vanity. This didn't just happen with the people that God saved during the time of Moses. But there were other branches of gods that this happened to as well. Why do the people that God saved have the same story as the people that the Moors, who are also the ancient Egyptians or the Canaanites, have when it comes to getting the Goths, who are the original caveman, to wash their bodies and to wipe their butts and to clean themselves after they go boo-boo? Because it's the same people is why. And they've tricked you into thinking that you're God's people and you're God's chosen people, when the boo-boo people are God's chosen people. These are Enki's creation that were made from the Neanderthals, who are the cavemen who they fell in love with and made babies with. They were made to replace the Ajiji when it comes to doing the work. They weren't made to replace the Gigi as the people. All of the people who made them are the Ajiji. They made them to replace them as the workers. That's why they ended up being the workers when they were in bondage in Egypt, because they were made to be the workers. Over time, they started to become beautiful, but they had to be taught not to be animal-like. They had to be taught not to be the boo-boo people anymore. They had to be taught to take baths and not touch anything after they went boo-boo. And not just to go sitting on furniture after they went boo-boo. And not just go sit on somebody's saddle and go lay on your bed after you went boo-boo. They had to teach them this. And this wasn't just the law for men. This was the law for women. For example, in Leviticus 15:28, it says, when a woman is cleansed of her discharge, she must count off 7 days, and after that she will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day she is to take 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest is to sacrifice one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for her before the Lord for her unclean discharge. You must keep the children of Israel separate from their uncleanness, so that they do not die by defiling my tabernacle, which is among them. See, they had to teach this to the women too. God is telling Moses to let these boo-boo people know that it is a sin to boo-boo on themselves and then just go jumping on saddles and sitting on furniture and laying in their beds with their boo-boo butt. This is what they had to learn this. And this isn't me talking. This is the book of a whole chapter dedicated in the book of Leviticus, chapter 15, dedicated to this discussion. The entire chapter is about this. He says, look, Moses, you have to keep the children of Israel separate from their uncleanliness so they don't die from disease by defiling his tabernacle. Because God was actually traveling with them and didn't want to be around no boo-boo. He made boo-booing on yourself and just letting it sit there while you run around touching everything and everybody and spitting on people. He made this a sin. This was their sin. He was teaching his creation. He wasn't teaching the gods. He was teaching this to his creation. The Egyptians washed their hands and didn't go boo-boo on themselves. We have to teach children how to do this when they get potty trained. This isn't like some insult. If you have a child and you never potty train your child and you never teach your child to wipe his butt, what's your child gonna do? Your child, and send a kid that never got potty trained, send him to school. And what's that kid gonna do? He gonna go boo-boo on himself just like the baby does. What's the baby do when he got on his diaper? The baby boo-boo on himself. He don't care. And he just sit in his boo-boo. This is what babies do. That's why we gotta come and teach them and clean them. And then when he get old enough, we gotta teach him, okay, look, we're not gonna go boo-boo in our diapers no more. We're gonna be a big boy now and we're gonna go use the toilet, right? At this time, they didn't have all these toilets like we got today. So God said, everybody has to have something that they can dig a ditch with so they can go outside the camp. They can go boo-boo. They can dig a hole and put their boo-boo in the hole and cover it up. And don't be just boo-booing on yourself and sitting on stuff and walk around spitting on people and all that. This is what they had to teach them. And we got to teach this to our children. So this ain't something to be offended by. This is just the truth of what was happening. Okay? He was teaching his creation because nobody had taught them this. Now, finally, when we look at these prophecies about how the diaspora would take place, this diaspora didn't happen to us as we were already in all the places throughout the world because we're the original people of all places in the world. The creation is not original to all places in the world. It was the creation that started out at the Ponic Steppe near the Caucasus Mountains. This is where they all lived. And over time, they started migrating to the Middle East, into North Africa, and into Europe. During the real transatlantic slave trade, they were sent from Europe to America on ships. It wasn't us who were getting put into slavery on ships. It was them who was getting put into slavery on ships. And I go into this in full detail in the video book Lost Along the Way. Go to the website. You need to get that book. The other prophecy that also came true for them, not for us, it came true for them, is that they would get their own land, which today they call Israel. All of these prophecies apply to them. They don't apply to us. But since we've been denied our history and have been taught that we're the slaves from Africa for 400 years, and we're really from Africa, we've started to think that that's true, when it's not true at all. We own the ships that we sent the European prisoners to America, which are all of the colonies. 13 colonies are all prisons. We owned all of the ships that we placed them on to ship them to America as prisoners. Yahweh's chosen people is them. He broke them, his creation, out of slavery that we put them in. We weren't the slaves and never had been. We controlled all of the cotton when cotton was king. Those were our plantations. And they were coming here as punishment for committing crimes to pick cotton on our plantations, not the other way around. So we really need to learn who we are, because when we don't know, we start going in some completely wrong directions. And this is why they get so mad when we start saying we're God's chosen people, because they know we're not God's chosen people. That doesn't mean we're not a chosen people within our own right. And we don't have our own God to be chosen, because we are chosen. We're just not Yahweh's chosen people. See? Because they're the chosen people. And when you break down the Bible, you start figuring that out. Your God is their devil. Christians hate the woman, and they prove it in the way they talk about the woman. Because the women were originally the priestesses. Originally, until monotheism took over. And there's a lot of detail involved with that, so I'll probably do a different video about it to really go into it. But they hate the woman who is our true God, because our God is a woman. When people say that Christians don't hate women and they don't look down on women, all you gotta do is point them to their own Bible. Christians do not like women, not even a little bit. If they did, then somebody please explain this verse for me. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 34. Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. They say this in the New Testament, which isn't even written in Hebrew because it's not part of the original Bible. Your new God of Moses and the people he saved from Egypt, who worshiped your true God originally. See, they hate women. The Egyptians were worshiping the woman God. If you look at the Egyptian cross, it's got the Ankh. It's called the Ankh. It has the circle on top of the cross. That circle represents the womb, the woman. The Christian cross has a phallus on the top of it. Why? Because they worship the man. They blame the fall of man on a woman, the woman. And they say that the woman comes from a man, when that's just not true. Only the creation we made. See, those humans is where the woman comes from a man. And now they got you worshiping the God that hates you. The same God that wrote the black codes and put the slaves in charge of you. They made you hate the God that you always worshiped, your original God. And they did this by force at first, and they made you change gods. And they taught the children to hate their original God. And it's such a complicated story, but again, that's why I wrote an entire book about it. Because this ain't something you can tell in a 1 hour, 2 hour, 5 hour, 10 hour video. It's not, you can't tell. You need much more time than that. So make sure you get your copy of it. It's called Lost Along the Way, and you can get a copy of it at lostalongtheway.org. It's a video book. Okay? And you got to start finding out who you really are, because you can't move forward until you do know who you really are. We aren't God's chosen people. We're God's chosen people. We're just not Yahweh's chosen people. And that's what we got to really figure out. And if you really believe that when the Moors had to civilize the so-called white Europeans, and this is just a fact, they were doing the same thing with the chosen people in Israel. And all the prophecies have come true. They have their own land. Okay? All of the prophecies came true for them. The only thing that comes true for us is more destruction and us going into slavery. going into slavery, because we were never the slaves. We were never the slaves until July 4th, 1830. And even when that's the case, we was only the slaves for 35 years. Okay. We not no 400 years slaves from Africa. But you need to really learn this history and find out who you really are so you can start returning to your real God. Because once you do, and you start praying to the God who really loves you instead of praying to the God that hates you, all of a sudden you start getting your prayers answered, and all of a sudden your life starts changing. Your life starts changing for the better, and your prayers start getting answered. You can't pray to the wrong God. You got to stop praying to the God that hates you. Stop praying to the God that wrote the black codes. If a God wrote the black codes for you to be the slaves, the God of the people who wrote the black codes and the God of the people who wrote Jim Crow, that's who you want to worship? That should let you know right there, this God is not your friend. And it's not because, you've been breaking the commandments. I mean, this is like some serious psychology when you start blaming yourself. It's like when the victim starts blaming themselves for being kidnapped and held prisoner and held hostage, and then start liking. There's a name for it. There's a name for it. So anyway, go to the website. Start praying to the right God. Start figuring out who your real God is. Because if you start looking, the truth will come to you. Sometimes the truth is hard to believe, though. Sometimes the truth is hard to believe, especially when you've been so indoctrinated for your whole life. Okay? All right. So look, go to lostalongtheway.org. Make sure you check out those blog articles. Get your copy of that video book. It is completely life-changing. Find out who you really are as a people so we can start moving forward. Because once enough of us know who we really are, we're going to really start making some huge changes, okay? Once enough of us start praying to our real God, we're going to start making some big changes, all right? So I'll see you on the next video then, all right? All right, fellow barbers. Peace and love.
This is a dangerous groups that we're dealing with now.